This is about the bills that have already been incurred. How do you walk away from that? You can just say, I'll pay China first and the rest of you can wait. I don't think the American people are for that.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi with members of her delegation speaking to reporters, and from the floor of the House, Speaker John Boehner.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by the guest chaplain, Reverend Andrew Hofer, O.P., Dominican House of Studies, Washington, D.C.
Let us pray. All-powerful and merciful God, we ask you to pour forth your spirit of blessings upon the world which you have freely made, this nation which trusts in you, and upon all here on Capitol Hill who turn to you. We have been wrong, and we have sinned. Give us all a share of your wisdom and your mercy. Enlighten us so that we can turn from our error and live by the power of your truth. Strengthened by you, may we stand united in necessary matters, acknowledge liberty in doubtful matters, and be charitable in all matters. We ask this of you, the source of all unity, liberty, and charity, to whom be glory and honor, now and forever. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois arise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal? Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Mr.
The journal
Speaker,
stands approved. The gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
A minute advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government has been shut down for 15 days. For 15 days, the President and Senate Democrats have made very few attempts to work with the House to reopen the government's doors. Washington Democrats have not been willing to meaningfully negotiate with House Republicans, who voted 4 times to avoid the fiscal crisis. Time is ticking. The people of South Carolina's 2nd Congressional District are hurting due to Washington Democrats' inability to engage in the legislative process. On behalf of the Savannah Riverside employee in Aiken, who is at risk of additional cuts to his hard-working paycheck, and the young family in Columbia who has been denied access to a medical trial that could potentially save their daughter's life, we should reopen the government, which promotes jobs. House Republicans understand the risk at stake. That is why we support common-sense proposals that will avoid national default and reopen the government's doors. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we'll never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Request 1 minute to address the House of Representatives, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise personally ashamed at the political sideshow in front of the White House perpetrated by Ms. Palin and Senator Cruz and his congressional allies. For members to protest against the consequences of a shutdown they themselves caused is the height of hypocrisy. The truth is we could pass a clean, continuing resolution today and get our government back to work. I was outraged by some of the imagery we saw from the Tea Partiers rallying in front of the House, calling for the President's impeachment not a year after his re-election by a large majority of the American people. Continued lies about the President's religion, including one participant saying, quote unquote, put the Koran down, have no place in civil discourse. But I was especially disturbed by the waving of the Confederate flag. a symbol of racial oppression being waved at our first African-American president. I call on my colleagues to condemn this hateful rhetoric, renounce these fringe voices within their coalition. This is a shameful display of members on the other side of the aisle, and they ought to stand up, the majority, to the extremists in their own party, as we have with our own party, and stop trying to hold the government in full faith and credit the United
Time has
States
expired.
government.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this shutdown is shining a light and showing the world some of the extreme members of the Tea Party. This weekend, Tea Party Senators Ted Cruz and Mike Lee led a rally on the National Mall where one of their speakers, Freedom Watch founder Larry Klayman, called on President Obama to leave town, put down the Quran, and come out with your hands up. The rally moved to the White House where Tea Partiers waved the Confederate flag in front of the president's home. The picture is unnerving, it's despicable, and it's not the same flag that we just pledged allegiance to in this House. It does not depict an America whose seal reads, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. To date, neither senator nor member of the Tea Party caucus in this House has publicly denounced this ugly, disgusting comment toward our president. I respectfully ask my friends across the aisle to do so. We may disagree on many things in this chamber, but I sincerely believe that no one in the Tea Party caucus believes that this display outside the President's house is acceptable. Condemn this behavior. If you don't and you let it go, you are condoning it. Out of many, one. E pluribus unum. As one America, let's denounce this. It's time to come together. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Day number 15. Mr. Speaker, today is day number 15 of a government shutdown, and we're less than 48 hours away from defaulting on our bills. We've never done that in the history of the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, if we don't pay our bills, that would be reckless behavior and that would be irresponsible. But we're seeing some progress. First, it seems like both the House and Senate have agreed to open up government until January 15th. Let's make that happen. Second, it seems like both the House and the Senate agree to lift the debt ceiling until February 7th. Great, let's make that happen. But let's do step number 3, which says let's set a budget process in place that negotiates a budget that starts to deal with our debt and our deficit, so we can get out of this crisis mode and start getting about the business of recreating jobs. Mr. Speaker, now is the time for leadership. Mr. Speaker, we're close. Let's get this done for the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker Abraham Lincoln offered these words: "The rule of a minority as a permanent arrangement is wholly inadmissible, so that rejecting the minority principle, anarchy or despotism in some form is all that is left." I think we have come to the point to recognize that it is important to represent the majority of Americans, majority of veterans who in some short order may be questioning whether or not their veterans or their disability check or their family's SSI or their mother's Social Security will come in an appropriate time. The Secretary of the Veterans Administration already said that he's had to discontinue overtime, slowing our review of benefit claims. This has led to delays for an average of 1,400 veterans a day. I say to my colleagues, rather than coddling those who wish to wave a Confederate flag in front of the White House, let us respect veterans whose lives are in cemeteries or whose lives have been recognized by being buried in America's cemeteries. Let us stop the foolishness and put on the floor of the House the reasonable response to opening the government now, so that men who are mourning those who have flags that are truly the American flag are being respected.
Members are reminded
not those
to
who wish
limit
to be in front of the White House. Open the government now.
Gentlewoman is not recognized.
I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Members are reminded to heed the gavel. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And here we are, folks, my colleagues, fellow Americans. Just a few days, the United States may not be able to pay its debts. That would be horrible for the country and for leadership as we know it. How did we get here? The other side, and you'll hear from them, you're hearing from them, took control of the place, and in 4 years, the spending went unchecked. The debt rose from $9 billion to now $17 trillion. They're asking for another $1 trillion to continue the spending unchecked, to continue the indebtedness. We can and we should come together to resolve this, but at some point you have to be responsible as a parent, as a member of Congress, as citizens, to hold the line, stop the spending, put a check on indebtedness to the future. Barack Obama voted against raising the debt limit when he was a senator and said that not addressing the debt was a lack of leadership. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker, the deadline for preventing the United States from defaulting on our debt is growing closer and the need to act more critical. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, we don't know the full extent of the damage that our nation's economy would suffer. But here's what we do know. A default would mean higher interest rates for over 278,000 New Yorkers with mortgages, loss of disability benefits for over 100,000 New York veterans, and the threat of being unable to pay Social Security and Medicare drug reimbursements to over 3,000 New Yorkers. Mr. Speaker, the argument by some in this chamber that defaulting on our debt wouldn't be a big deal is outrageous. Putting the full faith and credit of our nation, not to mention the strength of the world economy, on the line simply to prove a political point is both reckless and irresponsible. This House must put the best interests of the American people first and avert this disaster so we can get back to rebuilding this economy and nation building right here at home. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, this madness has got to stop. Yesterday, I heard from a local homeless shelter in Irvington, New Jersey, that is struggling to provide for the overwhelming amount of homeless new mothers. These are new mothers who can't feed their babies now that their WIC benefits have been cut off. Because of the government shutdown, homeless shelters across New Jersey are running low on baby formula, diapers, and the food they need to feed these mothers and their newborn babies. This kind of story is shameful, and it's happening all over New Jersey. The pain I see in my district is very real, and it could get a whole lot worse. If we choose not to pay our bills on time, 1.5 million people in New Jersey may not get their Social Security checks. 50,000 disabled veterans in New Jersey may not get their medical bills paid. Congress has 2 simple jobs right now. 1, to open the government, and 2, to pay bills on time. These are non-negotiable. The Republican Tea Party shouldn't hold this country hostage. Let's get to fixing America's problems again instead of creating them. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it is incomprehensible to reasonable men and women everywhere that our colleagues across the aisle are threatening to nuke the American economy by refusing to raise the debt ceiling unless their demands are met. This is irresponsible and reckless behavior. And nuke is the right word to use here. As Warren Buffett noted recently, even the threat of a default should liken to nuclear weapons too terrible to ever use. Allowing the U.S. to default on its obligations, whether it be an interest payment on a Treasury bond, a check due a Social Security recipient, or money due to a federal contractor so they can pay their workers, would have a cataclysmic effect on our economy and would be felt around the world. It would be a mistake that would impoverish a generation and haunt us for decades, and there could be no second opportunity to get it right. And anyone who dismisses how great a disaster a default would be should not be taken seriously. They should not be listened to or given a seat at the table where responsible decisions are made. Let's open up the government now.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my...
Without objection, the gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, America simply has a spending problem. That much is clear. Our national debt stands at nearly $17 trillion. $17 trillion. Let that number sink in for a moment. Is it that kind of legacy we want to pass on to our children and grandchildren? This year alone, our national deficit is projected to be around $700 billion, and that's despite the President's $600 billion tax increase this year. In fact, the government is going to collect more revenue this year than it's ever taken in before. How much sense does that make? What's being done to address the real driver of our debt? Runaway Washington spending. House Republicans want common sense spending cuts and reforms. We want everyone treated fairly under Obamacare, no special treatment, especially for big corporations or for members of Congress. We want a secure economic future for all Americans. It's time to act. It's time for real solutions. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As a senior Texan on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, I am very concerned about the transportation safety issues created by the Republican government shutdown. For example, aviation safety is in peril as the Federal Aviation Administration has furloughed approximately 1,700 safety inspectors and drastically limited aircraft maintenance. These type of safety risks created by the Republican government shutdown are intolerable. Further, the National Transportation Safety Board has been forced to furlough more than 90% of the staff. As a result, it has not been able to continue investigating deadly transportation incidents, nor initiate new investigations of accidents that have occurred since the Republican government shutdown began. Mr. Speaker, the political games being played by the Republican leadership are causing serious harm to transportation safety for all Americans, and it is totally unacceptable. We do have a spending problem created by the two Republican wars. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, over the weekend, many of us were still stuck in Washington waiting for a resolution, but one of the highlights of that was the opportunity to be with our veterans as we helped them to gain entrance to their national monuments, their memorials here in Washington, D.C. And it's just sad that they even have to wonder if they're breaking the law or if they need assistance to get into open-air monuments, open-air memorials that are theirs. It's even sadder to hear the rhetoric on this floor today that all that would be boiled down and impugned to one guy at random bringing a flag that some people don't like. Why don't we talk about those veterans and their great service they made for this country and the meanness of the Park Service arbitrarily renting barriers to shut them out? Why aren't we talking about that as much? This shutdown situation is made much worse by the attitude of those in the White House with exerting pain on people for shutting down the things they do care about in order to play this political game. So this isn't a Republican House shutdown. This is a U.S. Senate shutdown. As we've sent time after time, bill after bill over there. So let's get together and get this done right for the people of California, including the students I met with from
Gentleman's time has expired.
Lyman Gilmore Middle School here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, it pains me to see the shutdown's impact on everyday lives. While ordering coffee the other day, I asked Deona, the hardworking woman behind the counter, how she was doing that day. She confided that she'd been up all night, taking care of her 3-year-old son who was suffering from stomach pains. She was exhausted. She wanted to buy the lactated milk that settles her boy's stomach, but because of the shutdown, her WIC office was not open. Her WIC card was out of money, and she was a long way from payday. There are probably tens of thousands of Deonas out there, women working hard, worried about their kids and not sure how they'll make ends meet. The media may be focusing on the rancor, the talking points, the politics, but this shutdown is really about a little boy with stomach pains and a mother who cannot afford to give him relief. The Women's Infant and Children's Program helps low-income mothers buy formula and other healthy foods, and it's one of our most successful nutrition programs, and now it's just one of the shutdown's many casualties. Let us end the shutdown right now. Let us vote on a clean bill to fund the whole government. Let us restore vital programs like WIC, and let us stop this lunacy and get back to work for the American people.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Republican shutdown of government and their moves to default on our debt are like forcing the wrong medicine on a sick patient. You might get them to take it, but it could kill them. The only way America can pay back our nation's debts is through economic growth and job creation, not bad medicine. Let's not forget, we're still digging our way out from the Wall Street-induced Great Recession. Where did the $17 trillion of national debt come from? Well, the Wall Street recession cost American households $19.2 trillion in lost wealth, and the country 8.8 million jobs. Under President Obama, we've had 42 consecutive months of job growth, leading to 7.5 million jobs being created, unlike the Bush years when there wasn't a single job created. In fact, we lost over 500,000 jobs. In the last 12 months, the Bush years, the country lost 4.6 million jobs. So let's not forget that America has accumulated an $8.4 trillion trade deficit since 1975, and we've racked up $4 trillion in unpaid-for war spending. So what's the Republican solution? Shut down the government. Don't pay the bills. The latest idea is to govern by super committees. Mr. Speaker, we need to restore regular order, move bills to create jobs, and keep America's promises to our debtors. Let's nurse our nation back to health and stop the continuing economic pain with bad medicine. I yield back my remaining time.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Members are reminded to please heed the gavel. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is time for us to come together. This reckless government shutdown must end. Southern Arizonans and Americans all across our country are hurting, and our economy has been seriously harmed. The Senate is working on a bipartisan solution to reopen the government and to avoid putting America into default. I am very hopeful that we can find a reasonable and responsible plan and immediately bring it to the House floor for a vote. Mr. Speaker, we must end this blame game. We must put the American people first. Let us come together and act responsibly now. Let this government shutdown end, and let us ensure that we pay our bills now. It's important. The American people are calling on us to act now. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Republicans have again recklessly threatened America's future by allowing the nation already in a Republican shutdown to default on its debt unless the Congress votes to stop Obamacare. The government has been shut down for 2 weeks, and the United States will default on its debt in 2 days. All respected economists say a default means devastating and definitely unnecessary damage to our economy and to the global marketplace. Yet Republicans radically and irresponsibly push us toward the precipice of default. Their disconnect from financial reality is certainly breathtaking. Their actions are reckless, radical, and irresponsible. Mr. Speaker, there is power in numbers. If reasonable Republicans would stand up to their radical right wing, we can end this shutdown and avoid a default today. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent letter I received. I am writing this letter in regards to the new affordable health care. My husband and I are small business owners with 2 other employees. We purchased our insurance as individual insurance, and we received a letter this past week that our rates are changing. We currently have a $5,000 deductible with a monthly premium of $415, and on the new plan, if we stay with the current company, is going to be a $4,000 deductible with a monthly premium of $1,093.78. I have tried to access the www.healthcare.gov website, have been able to register an account, but have not been able to get any type of pricing. I have contacted both my Illinois senators and my House representatives and have been told that they are not in favor of a government shutdown. But I'm here to say if shutdown is what it takes to get people to listen, then shut down. The reason that I'm contacting you is because my congressmen are not willing to stand up to the president, and I just want to say good job for standing your ground. I yield back my
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Arizona seek recognition?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
As we enter the 3rd week of this reckless, irresponsible shutdown, it's no wonder that folks in my Arizona district and across the nation are disgusted. They see Washington treating this shutdown as a political game. I've got news for them. How far will the House majority push our nation just to score political points? No one wins. Everybody loses. And here's what an editorial in the Arizona Republic says today about this shutdown. When it's all over, the huge costs will be tallied and the hard work Congress has avoided will remain undone. America will join the world in wondering, is that all there is? The only heroes in this tragedy are the Americans who still believe their government can eventually do the right thing. Mr. Speaker, let's show the American people that this House is still capable of doing the right thing, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Nevada seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from Nevada is recognized for 1 minute.
15 days ago, an extreme faction of the Republican Party, supported by its leader and empowered by its more complacent members, brought about a shutdown of the entire federal government. It's since brought us to the brink of an unprecedented default, and now it refuses to accept a compromise that will open up the government, put people back to work, and lift the debt ceiling so the United States can pay its bills. Americans are fed up with the political obstructionism and dysfunction that have caused this unnecessary crisis. With the clock running out, we cannot afford to waste any more time. We need to act now. So I say to my colleagues across the aisle, stop your guerrilla tactics. Stop playing games with the good faith and credit of the United States. Stop putting radical ideology ahead of the welfare of the American people, and stop sabotaging our economy and our democracy. We've got to bring common sense, integrity, and honor back to the House of Representatives and do what's in the best interest of this great country. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
I seek recognition to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the 15th day of the government shutdown. But you know, I'm finally encouraged that we're seeing a bipartisan agreement in our Senate that will reopen the government and avert a credit default.
There's a lot of bashing of both sides going on down here, but you know what? I wanted to take this time to actually applaud our leaders in the United States Senate, Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, for their coming together to turn this ship around for the American people. And, Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to give a shout-out to Senator Collins and Senator Manchin for breaking the logjam. This past Friday, the shutdown became a harsh reality for many American families as tens of thousands of workers did not receive a paycheck. These are hardships everyday working families can't afford. This shutdown is deeply unfair to the American people. The clock is ticking, but we're seeing the framework, finally, of a common-sense solution to put an end to this recklessness and irresponsibility of this shutdown. I hope that this House has an opportunity to vote on the Senate proposal soon and put this whole mess behind us for the sake of the country and the American people. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
All right, so the House out, waiting to come back subject to the call of the Chair, which means when they're back, we'll be back with them right here on C-SPAN. The bill at hand on the floor of the House would fund local schools through December 15th. Of course, a lot of the work going on off the floor of the House today, negotiations continuing. Going to show you the White House here. We're standing by. We'll bring you to the White House when we get some briefing going on there. That's the White House briefing.